You know what's funny about marriage? You spend 40 years building a life with someone, raising children, sacrificing your dreams, standing by them through every failure and success. And then one day, they look at you like you're a stranger and walk away. Just like that. I'm Barbara Henderson, and I'm 70 years old. For 4 decades, I believed I had a partner, a companion, someone who would grow old with me. Instead, I got a man who decided that freedom was more valuable than our life together. But here's the thing. What he didn't know was that I had my own definition of freedom, and it was about to change everything. Before I tell you what happened, I want to know, where are you watching this from? Drop your location in the comments. I love knowing I'm not alone in this, that somewhere out there, someone understands what it means to be underestimated. Now let me take you back to where it all began. It was a Tuesday morning in March. I remember because Tuesdays were our grocery days. Had been for 38 years. I was making coffee in our kitchen in Charleston, South Carolina, the same kitchen where I'd made approximately 14,600 breakfasts for my husband, Richard. The sun was streaming through the window, hitting the countertops just right, and I was thinking about what to make for dinner. That's when Richard walked in with his suitcase. Not a weekend bag, his actual suitcase. The big one we used for international trips. "Barbara, we need to talk," he said. Those 5 words. You know the words that come before your entire world explodes. I set down my coffee mug slowly. Okay. He couldn't even look at me. This man who'd looked into my eyes on our wedding day and promised me forever was staring at his shoes like a guilty child. "I'm leaving," he said. "I've rented an apartment downtown. I'll come back for the rest of my things this weekend." The words didn't make sense. I actually laughed. Leaving? Leaving for what? A business trip? Leaving you, Barbara. I want a divorce. The kitchen suddenly felt too small, too bright, too ordinary for the moment that was destroying my life. "Why?" I managed to whisper. And here's where it gets rich. Here's the part that still makes my blood boil. He looked at me then, really looked at me and said, "I want my freedom. I've spent 40 years being responsible, being a husband, being a father. I've provided for this family, worked at the same company for 35 years, and now I want to live for myself. I want to travel, meet new people, experience life without obligations. Freedom." He wanted freedom. From me. From our marriage. From the life we'd built together. I stood there in my bathrobe, my 69-year-old face bare of makeup, my hands still warm from the coffee mug, and I realized something devastating. I had become his prison. "So that's it?" I asked. 40 years and you're just done?" He picked up his suitcase. "I've already talked to a lawyer. You'll be taken care of financially. The house is paid off. You'll be fine." And then he walked out, just like that. The sound of the door closing behind Richard was the loudest silence I'd ever heard. I stood in that kitchen for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. The coffee maker was still gurgling. The morning light was still streaming in. Everything looked exactly the same, but my entire world had shifted off its axis. When you're married for 40 years, you don't just share a life, you share a rhythm. I knew Richard's schedule better than my own. I knew he liked his shirts ironed with starch, that he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, that he got cranky if he didn't eat by 6:30. I had organized my entire existence around being his wife, and now I was what? Just Barbara? The first few days were mechanical. I called our daughter, Jennifer, who lived in Atlanta with her family. She was furious, heartbroken for me, ready to drive down immediately. I told her not to. What would she do? Sit here and watch me fall apart? Our son, Michael, was working overseas in Germany. The time difference made his anger feel distant, but I could hear it crackling through the phone line. "Dad's having a midlife crisis at 70. Is he insane?" Maybe he was. Or maybe I'd been insane to never see this coming. Friends started calling. The Whisper network in Charleston is faster than any news outlet. Richard had left Barbara after 40 years. Can you imagine? Poor Barbara. What will she do? I hated that. Poor Barbara. Like I was some helpless creature who couldn't function without a man. But here's what nobody knew, what nobody had ever bothered to ask. Before I became Richard's wife, before I became Jennifer and Michael's mother, I was someone else entirely. I was Barbara Mitchell, 3rd in my class at the College of Charleston, with a degree in business administration. I had job offers from 3 different firms in Charlotte. I had dreams of starting my own consulting company. I had ambition that burned so bright it sometimes scared me. And then I met Richard. He was charming, ambitious, working his way up at Kellington Manufacturing, a mid-sized company that produced industrial equipment. He talked about his future like it was a certainty, and somehow I got swept up in that vision. We got married 6 months after we met. I was 29. He was 31. Once I made junior executive, we'll be set, he'd promised. Then you can do whatever you want. But then Jennifer came along. Then Michael, then Richard's promotions required moves, first to Columbia, then back to Charleston. My career got put on hold. Temporarily, we said. Just until the kids were older, just until Richard was more established, just until. 40 years of just until. And now, sitting in my empty house with divorce papers on the way, I realized something that made me feel both furious and strangely exhilarated. I had given up everything for a man who'd just given up on me. Richard wanted freedom? Fine. But what he didn't understand was that he'd just freed me too, and I was about to remind him and everyone else exactly who Barbara Mitchell Henderson really was. The forgotten woman was about to become unforgettable. Grief does strange things to a person. Some people eat, some people stop eating, some people sleep for days. Me? I got curious. A week after Richard left, I was sitting at my computer at 2 o'clock in the morning, unable to sleep, when I decided to look up Kellington Manufacturing. Richard had worked there for 35 years, starting as a junior accountant and working his way up to chief financial officer. It was his entire identity. When people asked what he did, his chest would puff out as he said, "I'm CFO of Kellington." I'd been to countless company dinners, Christmas parties, retirement celebrations. I knew the CEO, Marcus Kellington, and his wife Patricia. I'd made small talk with board members. I'd smiled and played the supportive wife role perfectly, but I'd never actually paid attention to the business itself. Now I dove in deep. Kellington Manufacturing had annual revenues of approximately $48 million. They employed 230 people. They'd been family-owned for 3 generations, but according to recent news articles I found, Marcus Kellington was getting older, 76, and his children had no interest in taking over the company. There were rumors of a potential sale. I dug deeper using some of the research skills I developed during my abbreviated business career decades ago. Financial databases that required subscriptions, industry reports, local business journals. What I found was fascinating. Kellington Manufacturing was profitable, but stagnant. They'd been doing the same thing the same way for 30 years. Their main contracts were with 3 major clients, all of whom were aging out or consolidating. The company needed innovation, needed to diversify, needed fresh leadership, and Marcus Kellington was actively looking for a buyer. The asking price, according to a business broker listing I found buried in an industry website, was $32 million. I sat back in my chair, my heart pounding. $32 million. I didn't have $32 million. Richard and I had savings, retirement accounts, the house, but nothing close to that amount. Even with a divorce settlement, I'd be comfortable, but not wealthy. Certainly not buy a company wealthy. But I couldn't stop thinking about it. Richard's entire identity was tied to that company. He strutted around Charleston like being CFO made him important. He networked at the country club, played golf with Marcus Kellington, attended board meetings like he was integral to every decision. What would happen if someone bought that company? What would happen if that someone was me? The idea was absurd, impossible. I was a 70-year-old woman who hadn't worked in the business world in 4 decades. I'd been a stay-at-home mother, a volunteer, a member of the garden club. Nobody would take me seriously. But the more I thought about it, the more the idea took root. Richard wanted freedom from me. What if I became his boss? What if the woman he'd discarded, the woman he deemed no longer useful, became the person controlling his career, his salary, his future? I smiled in the darkness of my study. It was a crazy idea, absolutely insane. But I'd spent 40 years being reasonable, being supportive, being the woman everyone expected me to be. Maybe it was time to be unreasonable. Maybe it was time to shock everyone, including myself. You can't buy a company on anger alone. Trust me, I learned that quickly. The morning after my late-night revelation, I woke up with renewed purpose. For the first time since Richard walked out, I didn't feel destroyed. I felt dangerous. But dangerous without a plan is just reckless. I needed help, real help. The kind of help that understood mergers, acquisitions, and high-stakes business negotiations. So I called the one person I knew who might listen without thinking I'd lost my mind, Thomas Chen. We'd known each other since college. He'd been in several of my business classes, and we'd stayed in casual touch over the years through Christmas cards and occasional emails. While I'd been raising children, Thomas had built a career as a mergers and acquisitions attorney in Charlotte. He was semi-retired now, but still consulted on major deals. "Barbara Henderson," he said when he answered, surprise evident in his voice. "It's been at least 3 years. How are you?" "Richard left me," I said, not bothering with small talk. "And I want to buy his company." There was a long pause. Then, "I'm going to need you to repeat that." I told him everything: the abandonment, the divorce, my research into Kellington Manufacturing, my admittedly insane idea to acquire the company where my soon-to-be ex-husband worked as CFO. To his credit, Thomas didn't laugh. He didn't tell me I was being emotional or irrational. He listened. "Okay," he said finally. "Let's say you're serious. Do you have $32 million? "No, but I have options." "Such as?" I'd been thinking about this all night. The house is worth about $1.2 million. My divorce settlement should be substantial. Richard has significant retirement accounts, investment portfolios. Combined with my own savings, I could potentially have access to 3, maybe 4 million in liquid assets. That's nowhere near enough. Which is why I need investors, silent partners, people who see the potential in Kellington Manufacturing and are willing to take a chance on me turning it around. Thomas was quiet. I could hear him thinking through the logistics. "Barbara, I'm going to be straight with you. This is complicated. You'd need to convince investors that you can run a manufacturing company despite having no recent business experience. You'd need to conduct due diligence, negotiate terms, structure the deal, and you'd need to do it all quickly before someone else snatches up the company. This isn't revenge. This is a multi-million-dollar business transaction." "I know. Do you? Because once you start this process, there's no going back. If word gets out that you're trying to buy Kellington, it'll spread through Charleston like wildfire. Richard will know. The whole community will know. You'll be under a microscope." I thought about that, about the gossip, the judgment, the whispers of poor Barbara turning into crazy Barbara. And I realized I didn't care. For 40 years, I'd worried about what people thought, about being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect hostess, about not making waves or causing scenes. Richard had freed me from all of that. "Thomas," I said quietly, "I've been invisible for 40 years. Maybe it's time people see me." He laughed, actually laughed. "All right then. When can you come to Charlotte? We have work to do." "Tomorrow, Val," I said. "I'll be there tomorrow." Raising $32 million is not for the faint of heart. Thomas connected me with his network, private equity firms, angel investors, retired executives looking for interesting opportunities. Over the next 6 weeks, I pitched my vision for Kellington Manufacturing to 17 different potential investors. Most meetings went the same way. I'd walk into some glass tower conference room in Charlotte or Atlanta, dressed in the most professional clothes I could assemble from my outdated wardrobe. They'd see a 70-year-old woman, and their expressions would shift, polite but skeptical, like I'd wandered into the wrong meeting. Then I'd open my presentation. I'd researched everything: Kellington's financials, their client base, their competitors, market trends in industrial manufacturing. I'd identified 3 key areas where the company was leaving money on the table: outdated equipment limiting production capacity, failure to pursue contracts with emerging tech companies needing specialized parts, and zero investment in sustainable manufacturing practices that were becoming industry requirements. Kellington Manufacturing is profitable despite itself, I told a room full of investors in Atlanta. Imagine what it could do with actual strategy. Some investors were intrigued. Others dismissed me outright. "Mrs. Henderson," one particularly condescending man in his 50s said, "with all due respect, your business experience is from the 1980s. Manufacturing has changed significantly." "You're right," I replied. "Which is why I'd be hiring a strong operational team with current expertise. My role would be strategic oversight and ownership. I'm not trying to run the factory floor. I'm trying to transform the business model." He wasn't convinced. Neither were investors 6, 9, and 12. But investor number 13 was different. Her name was Patricia Okonkwo, a Nigerian-American entrepreneur who'd built and sold 3 companies in different industries. She was 62, sharp as a blade, and didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Why do you really want this company?" she asked me directly. "And don't give me the speech about untapped potential. I've read your materials. Tell me the truth." So I did. I told her about Richard, about being left after 40 years, about feeling erased and invisible, about wanting to prove that I was more than just someone's wife. Patricia leaned back in her chair, studying me. You want revenge? I want recognition, I corrected. There's a difference. She smiled. Is there? Revenge is destructive. It's about hurting someone. Recognition is about proving your own worth. I genuinely believe I can turn Kellington around. But yes, the fact that my ex-husband works there and will have to watch me succeed, that's extremely satisfying. Patricia laughed, a real, deep laugh. I like you, Barbara. You're honest. Too many people in business hide behind corporate speak. All right, I'm in for $6 million, but I want quarterly reports and a seat as an advisory board member. Done. Over the next 3 weeks, Thomas and I assembled the rest. Patricia brought in 2 other investors from her network. A private equity firm committed $12 million for 40% equity. I leveraged everything I had, the house, Richard's retirement accounts that would become mine in the divorce settlement, my savings, for another $4 million. By mid-June, we had it. $32 million. Thomas drew up the offer to purchase Kellington Manufacturing, and then we waited to see if Marcus Kellington would accept. Richard still had no idea what was coming. Marcus Kellington called me personally on a Thursday afternoon. Barbara, Marcus Kellington here. I received a purchase offer for my company, and your name is on it as the primary buyer. Is this some kind of mistake? I took a deep breath. No mistake, Marcus. I'm serious. You want to buy Kellington Manufacturing? Yes. There was a long pause. I could practically hear him recalibrating everything he thought he knew about me. Does Richard know about this? Not yet, and I'd appreciate if it stayed that way until the deal is finalized. This is a legitimate business transaction, Marcus. I have the capital, I have investors, and I have a solid plan for the company's growth. Thomas Chen is handling the legal side. You can verify everything through him. Barbara, I've known you for over 30 years. You've been to my home. You're a lovely woman, and please don't take this the wrong way. You're not a businesswoman. You've been a homemaker. I'd been expecting this. I was a businesswoman before I became a homemaker. Top of my class in business administration, offers from multiple firms. I set that aside for my marriage. Now I'm reclaiming it. But manufacturing? It's not exactly what? Not exactly appropriate for a 70-year-old woman? Marcus, you're 76. If you can run this company, I can certainly own it. He laughed at that. Actually laughed. Fair point. Look, I'll be honest with you. I've had 2 other offers, both from larger manufacturing conglomerates. They're offering similar prices, but with clauses that would mean layoffs and restructuring. Your offer promises to keep the current workforce intact. That's correct. I believe Kellington's strength is its people. I want to invest in them, not gut them. Another pause. I'm going to need to meet with you and your investors. Due diligence. Can you come to Charleston next week? Absolutely. The meeting happened 6 days later in Kellington's conference room. The same conference room where I'd attended countless boring company dinners, smiling politely while the men talked business. This time I sat at the head of the table. Patricia Okonwo joined via video conference, as did representatives from our private equity partners. Thomas Chen sat beside me, our documentation impeccable. Marcus reviewed everything: financials, business plan, transition strategy. His own lawyers were present asking pointed questions. 4 hours later, Marcus set down the final page. Your plan is solid, more solid than I expected, frankly. You're offering fair value, keeping my employees, and honoring existing contracts. He looked at me directly, but I have to ask one more time, how does Richard factor into this? He's my CFO. This is going to be extraordinarily awkward. That's between Richard and me, I said calmly. As far as the business is concerned, he's a valuable employee with institutional knowledge. Unless he chooses to resign, I have no intention of firing him. Marcus studied me for a long moment. Then he extended his hand across the table. All right, Barbara, you have a deal. We shook. Just like that, I became the owner of a $48 million manufacturing company and my ex-husband's boss. If you're enjoying this story and want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, this is just the beginning. The closing took 3 weeks. Lawyers, paperwork, financial transfers. It felt like the longest 3 weeks of my life. Richard still didn't know. The official closing was scheduled for July 15th. I'd be announced as the new owner of Kellington Manufacturing that morning at a company-wide meeting. Richard would be there. I barely slept the night before. Not from anxiety, from anticipation. The meeting was set for 9 a.m. at Kellington's main facility. I arrived early with Thomas, Patricia, who'd flown in to see this moment, and Marcus Kellington. Marcus had told his leadership team that the company had been sold, and that the new owner would be introduced today, but he'd kept my identity confidential per our agreement. As far as Richard knew, he was simply attending a standard announcement meeting. Employees filed into the large assembly area, 230 people, some curious, some anxious about what new ownership might mean. I saw Richard arrive with several other executives. He looked good, tanned, relaxed. His freedom apparently agreed with him. He hadn't seen me yet. I was standing in a side office with Patricia and Thomas, watching through the window. "You ready?" Patricia asked me. "I've been ready for 40 years, I said. At 9 o'clock sharp, Marcus walked to the podium. The room quieted. "Good morning, everyone. I know there's been speculation about the company's future. As you know, I've been exploring options for succession planning. I'm 76. My children aren't interested in the business. And I wanted to ensure Kellington Manufacturing went to someone who would preserve its legacy and invest in its future." People nodded. Richard was standing with his arms crossed, looking professional and slightly bored, like he'd sat through 100 meetings just like this. Marcus continued. "I'm pleased to announce that we have a new owner, someone who's committed to keeping our workforce intact, honoring our contracts, and bringing fresh vision to our operations. Someone who understands the value of this company and its people." He paused, then looked toward the side office where I stood. "Please welcome the new owner of Kellington Manufacturing, Barbara Henderson." I walked out. The silence was deafening. Every head turned. 230 pairs of eyes landed on me. But I was only looking at one person. Richard's face went through about 5 emotions in 3 seconds: confusion, disbelief, recognition, shock, and finally, something that might have been horror. Our eyes met across the room. I walked to the podium, calm and collected, even though my heart was hammering. I'd prepared remarks, but seeing Richard's expression made me want to deviate from the script. "Good morning," I said, my voice steady. "For those who don't know me, I'm Barbara Henderson. Some of you might recognize me from company events over the years. I was married to your CFO, Richard Henderson, for 40 years. Was. Past tense." I saw Richard flinch. "I understand this is unexpected, but I want to assure you that this is a legitimate business acquisition, backed by experienced investors. I'm here because I see tremendous potential in this company. We're going to modernize our equipment, pursue new contracts, and position Kellington Manufacturing as a leader in sustainable industrial production." I outlined my vision: 5 minutes of concrete plans, financial commitments, timeline for changes. The employees started to relax. These were real plans, not corporate platitudes. But Richard looked like he might be sick. When I finished, Marcus opened the floor for questions. A dozen hands went up. Richard's wasn't one of them. He just stood there, staring at me like I was a ghost, or maybe like he was seeing me for the first time. After the meeting, Marcus gave me a tour of the facility. My facility now. The production floor, the offices, the break rooms. Employees were polite but clearly processing the shock. Richard had disappeared immediately after my announcement. "He left through the side entrance," Marcus told me quietly. "Didn't say a word to anyone. You want me to call him?" "No," I said. "He'll need time to process. We'll talk when he's ready." But I wasn't going to chase him. That wasn't the point of any of this. I spent the rest of that first day meeting with department heads, reviewing operations, asking questions. I had so much to learn, and I wasn't going to pretend otherwise. "I don't know everything about manufacturing," I told the operations manager. A woman in her 50s named Carol, who'd been with the company for 23 years. "But I know how to analyze systems, identify inefficiencies, and listen to people who do know. Tell me what's working and what's not." Carol looked surprised that I was actually asking. "Well, our main bottleneck is in quality control. We're using the same inspection process we've used for 15 years, but with newer contracts requiring tighter tolerances, we're creating backups. We need updated testing equipment." "How much?" "About $200,000 for the system we need." I pulled out my phone and made a note. "Get me a full proposal by Friday. If the numbers make sense, we'll move forward." Her eyes widened. "Just like that?" "Just like that. Marcus has been conservative about capital expenditures because he was planning to sell. I'm planning to grow. Different priorities." Word spread quickly through the company. The new boss was actually listening, actually willing to invest. By 3 p.m., my temporary office, Marcus's old office, which I was using until I could set up my own, had a line of people waiting to talk to me. suggestions for improvements, complaints about processes, ideas for new products. I listened to every single one. At 5:30, when the day shift was ending, my assistant knocked on the door. Yes, I had an assistant now. Marcus's longtime secretary, Denise, who'd agreed to stay on. "Mrs. Henderson, your ex-husband is here. He wants to speak with you." There it was. "Send him in," I said. Richard walked into the office looking like he'd aged 5 years in 8 hours. His tie was loosened, his face pale. "Barbara," he said. "Richard, have a seat." He sat, then stood, then sat again. I can't. How did I buy a company?" I finished. "Investors, capital, a solid business plan. It's not that complicated when you actually have ambition." He flinched at that. "Good. You did this to humiliate me," he said. "No," I replied calmly. "I did this because I saw an opportunity and I took it. Your presence here is incidental to my business objectives." "Incidental?" "Barbara, I've worked here for 35 years. I'm the CFO, and you can remain the CFO, assuming you're good at your job." "Are you good at your job, Richard?" He stared at me like I'd slapped him. "You know I am. Then we don't have a problem. This is a business, not a marriage. You wanted freedom from personal obligations, here it is. We're now purely professional colleagues. I'm the owner. You're an employee. That's the extent of our relationship." Richard tried to resign twice in the first month. The first time I rejected it. "You have institutional knowledge this company needs during the transition. Your resignation would be detrimental to operations." The second time I called his bluff. "If you really want to leave, I won't stop you. But running away because you're uncomfortable isn't freedom, Richard. It's cowardice." He stayed. It wasn't easy for him. I could see that. Every day he had to watch me make decisions, lead meetings, transform the company he'd thought he understood. And transform it, I did. Within 3 months, we'd upgraded our quality control systems, landed 2 major new contracts with tech companies, and implemented a sustainability initiative that got us featured in an industry magazine. Revenue increased by 18%. Employee satisfaction scores went up for the first time in 5 years. I hired a brilliant operations director, promoted Carol to VP of Quality Assurance, and brought in a young marketing manager who understood how to position us for 21st century manufacturing. The company was thriving. Richard, meanwhile, was competent but diminished. He did his job, managed finances, reported to me weekly, attended meetings. But the swagger was gone. The man who'd walked out of our marriage wanting freedom now sat in my office every Friday afternoon for status updates, answering my questions, justifying his decisions. I wasn't cruel. I never berated him or made personal comments. I was professional, fair, and demanding of excellence, just like I was with every other employee. But the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly, and we both knew it. The Charleston community was absolutely scandalized, of course. Dinner party conversations came to screeching halts when I walked into rooms. I heard the whispers. "Can you believe she bought his company? Is that even legal? Isn't that some kind of conflict of interest?" My friends were divided. Some thought I was brilliant. Others thought I was being vindictive. Jennifer flew down from Atlanta to see me. We had lunch at my favorite restaurant downtown. "Mom, are you happy?" she asked me directly. "Really happy? Or are you just proving a point?" I thought about that. "Both," I admitted. "I'm proving a point, and I'm happy doing it. Your father thought I was obsolete, that I'd spent 40 years being nothing but his wife, and I'd have no identity without him. He was wrong. Jenny, I had an identity. I just stored it away. Now I've taken it back out." She smiled. "Good. He deserved this. He really did." "Maybe," I said, "but that's not why I did it. I did it for me." By month 6, something interesting happened. Richard knocked on my office door after a Friday meeting. "Barbara, can we talk off the record?" I gestured to the chair. "All right." He sat down looking more humble than I'd ever seen him. "I was wrong about leaving, about thinking I needed freedom from our marriage. I was an idiot. I waited. You're incredible. Watching you run this company, transform it, command respect from everyone, I realize now that I never really saw you. I took you for granted for 40 years, and I'm sorry. I'm genuinely sorry.